He had lived in his home for 19 years. He had never missed a single HOA payment. He had never broken a single rule. He had been a model neighbor, quiet, respectful, and cooperative. And then one afternoon, he decided to repaint his mailbox. He chose a color he liked. A color that looked clean and sharp and perfectly fine to every single person who walked past it. But to his HOA, that color was a declaration of war. They sent him a warning letter. He ignored it because he genuinely did not believe anything serious would happen over a mailbox. Then the fine started. $25. Then $50. Then hundreds. Then thousands. By the time it was all over, this man was staring at a $50,000 fine over the color of his mailbox. And the most unbelievable part of this entire story, the HOA said they were completely within their rights. This is that story, and it will make you absolutely furious. Welcome back to HOA Exposed, the channel that tells the real stories of what is happening to homeowners across America. Today we are covering a case that went viral for all the right reasons. Because when people heard what happened to this man, they could not believe it was real. A $50,000 fine. Over a mailbox color. Not a dangerous structure. Not an illegal building. Not a health hazard. A mailbox. Painted the wrong shade of color according to a rule book that most residents had never even fully read. If you think your HOA cannot do something like this to you, stay with me until the very end. Because after today, you will think very differently. And you will know exactly what to do if it ever happens to you. His name was David Ruiz, and he was a 58-year-old retired schoolteacher living in a gated community called Cypress Creek Commons in Boca Raton, Florida. David had bought his home back in 2004 and had lived there peacefully for nearly 2 decades. He was the kind of neighbor everyone loved. He kept his lawn immaculate. He participated in community events. He paid every fee on time, every single year. He had never received a single HOA violation in 19 years of living there. David was not a troublemaker. He was not trying to pick a fight. He was just a retired man living quietly in the home he had worked his entire life to own. And then came the mailbox. In the spring of 2022, David noticed that his mailbox was looking worn and faded. The paint was chipping and it looked old and tired. So he did what any responsible homeowner would do. He decided to give it a fresh coat of paint. He went to his local hardware store, picked out a color he liked, a deep charcoal gray, and spent one afternoon repainting it. It looked great. Clean, sharp, and modern. His neighbors complimented it. David was pleased. He thought nothing more of it. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived from the HOA. The letter informed David that his mailbox color was not in compliance with the community's approved color palette. According to the HOA's guidelines, buried deep in a 47-page document that David had received when he moved in. Nearly 20 years ago, mailboxes in Cypress Creek Commons were required to be painted in one of 3 approved shades. Charcoal gray was not one of them. The approved colors were antique bronze, colonial black, and heritage brown. David's charcoal gray was considered a violation. David read the letter and could not help but laugh. He called the HOA office and spoke to a board member. He explained that his charcoal gray mailbox looked virtually identical to colonial black. The difference between the 2 colors was barely noticeable in normal daylight. He asked if he could simply keep it as is, since no reasonable person could tell the difference. The HOA board member was unmoved. "Rules are rules," she said. "The mailbox must be repainted in an approved color within 30 days or fines would begin accumulating. David was frustrated, but not alarmed. He figured the fine would be something small and manageable. He decided to wait it out, partly out of principle, and partly because he genuinely believed no reasonable organization would pursue something this trivial aggressively. He was wrong, because this HOA was anything but reasonable. After 30 days, the fines began. $25 per week for the first month. David ignored them. The HOA escalated to $50 per week. David still did not repaint. Not because he was being stubborn, but because he was now on principle. He believed the rule was unreasonable, and he wanted to challenge it. By month 4, the weekly fines had increased to $100 per week. By month 6, a law firm had sent David a formal demand letter. The total outstanding fines and legal fees at that point had reached $12,000. Over a mailbox. David finally hired his own attorney. His attorney wrote back to the HOA law firm, arguing that the fine amounts were disproportionate and unreasonable, that the color difference between charcoal gray and colonial black was negligible, and that the HOA had failed to follow proper escalation procedures as outlined in their own governing documents. The HOA responded by adding more legal fees to David's bill. They were not backing down. And neither was David. The case went to civil court. And this is where things got truly unbelievable. In court, the HOA's attorneys argued that the cumulative fines, legal fees, administrative costs, and interest had now reached a grand total of $52,000. $52,000 for a mailbox. David's own legal fees had added another $18,000 to his financial burden. He was now looking at potential financial devastation, not because he had built an illegal structure, not because he had damaged anyone's property, not because he had done anything genuinely harmful, but because he had painted his mailbox the wrong shade of gray. The judge in the case was visibly uncomfortable with the situation. In court proceedings, the judge questioned the HOA's attorneys extensively about whether the fine amounts were proportionate to the violation. The HOA's attorneys maintained that their client had followed all procedures correctly, and that the accumulation of fines was the direct result of the homeowner's refusal to comply. David's attorney argued passionately that no court in a just society should allow $50,000 in fines over a mailbox color dispute. The court case attracted significant local media attention. And then it went national. When the story broke nationally, the public reaction was overwhelming. News channels picked it up immediately. Social media exploded. Late-night talk show hosts made jokes about it. But behind the jokes was a very real and very angry public sentiment. People were furious. Comment sections across the internet filled up with thousands of Americans sharing their own HOA horror stories. Veterans, teachers, nurses, retirees, people from every walk of life describing how their HOAs had fined them, threatened them, and made their lives miserable over trivial rule violations. David Ruiz's mailbox had become a symbol of something much bigger. It had become the symbol of HOA overreach in America. And the HOA, which had confidently pursued this case for months, suddenly found itself the most hated organization in the country. Faced with enormous public pressure and the very real possibility of an appeal that could set a legal precedent, limiting HOA fine powers statewide. The HOA board agreed to mediation. In mediation, a settlement was reached. David agreed to repaint his mailbox in one of the 3 approved colors. The HOA agreed to waive all fines and legal fees in full. Both parties agreed to keep the specific terms of the settlement confidential. David went home, repainted his mailbox colonial black, a color so similar to his charcoal gray that his neighbors could barely tell the difference, and went on with his life. He told reporters afterward that the experience had cost him $18,000 in legal fees, months of stress, and his faith in the HOA system. He said he would never trust an HOA again. David's case was resolved. But here is what that story represents. There are currently around 370,000 HOA communities in the United States. Over 74 million Americans live under HOA governance. And in communities across the country, people are being fined right now for things just as trivial as David's mailbox. Wrong flower color in the front garden. Basketball hoop left in the driveway overnight. A child's bicycle visible from the street. A welcome mat that does not match the approved pallet. Garbage bins put out 1 hour too early. These are real violations that real HOAs have fined real Americans for, sometimes thousands of dollars. And most of these people do not have the resources to fight back the way David did. Most of them simply pay, or lose their homes. So what do you do if your HOA comes after you over something trivial? First, read your HOA's governing documents carefully. Every HOA must have its rules written down and accessible to all homeowners. Know exactly what you agreed to when you bought your home. Second, respond to every violation notice in writing. Never ignore them, even if the violation seems absurd. Ignoring notices allows fines to accumulate rapidly. Third, always request a formal hearing before the HOA board. Every homeowner has the right to dispute a violation in a hearing. Use it. Fourth, check your state's HOA laws regarding fine caps. Many states have laws that limit how much an HOA can fine a homeowner for a single violation. Your state may have protections you do not know about. And fifth, if fines escalate to thousands of dollars over a minor violation, consult an attorney immediately. Many HOA attorneys offer free initial consultations. And in cases like David's, the publicity of the situation can be your most powerful weapon. David Ruiz painted his mailbox colonial black and went back to his quiet life. But the $50,000 number never left the public's mind. Because that number represents something. It represents what happens when organizations are given power without accountability. It represents what happens when rules become more important than reason. And it represents what happens when ordinary people are forced to fight expensive, legal battles over something as simple as the color of their mailbox. America was built on the idea that a man's home is his castle. That what a person does on their own property, within reason, is their own business. The HOA system, at its worst, turns that idea completely upside down. And until Americans demand reform, until state legislatures put real limits on HOA power, stories like David's will keep happening. Every single day. In neighborhoods across this country. Share this video with every homeowner you know. Because awareness is the first step toward change. And subscribe to this channel, because we have many more stories to tell. See you in the next one.